Welcome back to Morbid Michigan. Today's topic really has nothing to do with Michigan at all. In fact, this one should probably be titled Morbid Misogyny, because that's really what it's all about. A plot near where Marilyn Monroe and Hugh Hefner are both laid to rest has recently been put up for auction. And I've been seeing a lot of news agencies try to play this like it's some cool, fun, quirky kind of story, like, you could be laid to rest right next to Playboy owner and one of his models. And as soon as I read that in an article somewhere, I was baffled because it's really wrong to just label Marilyn Monroe as a Playboy model, and that's kind of part of what this video is about, and the endless disrespect that she has suffered, obviously throughout her life, but then also after her passing. So first I want to talk about why Hugh Hefner is buried next to her in the first place, and why it's wrong to call her a Playboy model. So let's just get started. So the reason why it's wrong to call Marilyn Monroe a Playboy model is because she never consented to appear in Playboy at all. The notorious pictures that were used as the very first centerfold in the very first issue of Playboy that made the magazine blow up at all were not initially for Playboy. It was actually taken by a pinup photographer 4 years before that first issue was ever released. It was taken by a photographer named Tom Kelly, who Marilyn knew and had done some previous modeling work for. And the only reason why she agreed to take those photos was so that she could pay her bills.
I was hungry and I wouldn't have a roof over my head. So Tom Kelly had asked me, I had done some beer ads for him, and he had asked me to pose nude. But I always said, no, I don't do nudes, never.
When I first asked her to do it, she turned me down. But after thinking it over for a few days, when she came back and said, I would like to do it.
And then I got so far behind the rent, 4 weeks, and I was in debt and everything, so I called up and I said, are you sure they won't recognize me? He said, I promise. I said, well, if it's at night and you don't have any helpers.
Despite the fact that the Golden Dreams pinup calendar would go on to sell millions of copies, Marilyn only made $50 from those original photos. So Tom Kelly ended up selling the rights to Hugh Hefner for $500. And Marilyn did agree to sign her rights off to, those photos belonged to Tom. He had the right to sell them, even though morally it was very questionable, because Marilyn made it clear that she didn't want them publicized in that way. She signed her name off as Mona Monroe, and as you heard her say, she wanted to look unrecognizable.
By the time it was known, I was hired at Fox, rehired, and I remember they called on the set, the publicity department, and said, did you pose for a calendar? And I said, yes. Anything wrong? Their voice says, don't say you did. I said, but I did. I signed the release and I did, and I feel I should say it, so I did.
Marilyn was still a relatively new actress at the time, and when these photos came out, it was the early 1960s, so this was a pretty big scandal. 20th Century Fox tried to get her to deny that that was her in the photos and say that they were falsified in some way. But she decided to own it. I guess she didn't want to live a lie, and she stood by having taken them regardless of what anyone at the time thought. But the point still stands that those photos were used in a way she never intended, and Hugh took them without permission and used them in a way that she really never would have wanted, judging by the stuff that she herself has said in interviews.
Crowds of the curious are held back at a respectful distance from the private funeral that Joe DiMaggio and others arranged for Marilyn Monroe. After services in the chapel of Westwood Memorial Cemetery, in which eulogies and passages from the scripture were read, the casket is placed in the hearse to be taken to a crypt on the nearby corridor of memories.
Marilyn, of course, passed away at 36, but Hefner lived until the ripe age of 91. And in 1992, he bought that burial plot next to Marilyn for $75,000. He said in an interview, "I'm a believer in things symbolic. Spending eternity next to Marilyn is too sweet to pass up." So that is how Hugh Hefner found himself laid to rest right next to Marilyn Monroe, regardless of what she thought about him and the fact that the two never even met. But we're looking at the plot next to Marilyn. Now we need to look at the plot that's above her. So if you thought that Hugh was creepy, this is going to get even weirder. A man named Richard Poncher bought the plot directly above Marilyn in that mausoleum, and he requested that he be buried face down, facing Marilyn for all of his afterlife. Apparently Richard told his wife Elsie, "If I croak, if you don't put me upside down over Marilyn, I'll haunt you for the rest of my life." But a few years ago, Elsie tried to sell the plot on eBay and move him somewhere else, but it didn't work out. Now she is laid to rest right next to her husband, directly above Hugh Hefner. So yeah, I saw people talking about this online and I figured I'd give my 2 cents. I think it's important to follow people's wishes after they die, but this is going a little bit too far and clearly not taking into consideration at all what Marilyn would have wanted. But that's just my 2 cents. Anyways, have a grave day and please respect the dead. Thank you.